Hey, I'm Kevin. I'm still in college, and things are happening at home at the same time. I think I want to start out with something unique and positive with this video. When I was in college, I had in the first year, I had to take phys ed, which I didn't know that was something that most colleges required. I should point out too that this college is big time redneck. I mean, hunters, In fact, they even took off for the first day of turkey season. And I always made the joke, I said, well, why is anybody taking off? I said, there's enough turkeys in this town that, to fill anybody's freezer. So, because they were kind of crazy, that's for sure. Turkeys are crazy if you didn't know. Anyway, we had to take phys ed, and some of these guys that came from out of town, they were jocks. They had been in, high school football and things like that, and they knew how to play. They knew how to play sports. But when we would get out on the football field, it was kind of unique. The phys ed teacher we had, now, I said my teachers were good. He's one that, if there was anything good about him, it was the fact he just let us go. I don't know what he did. I mean, except collect his paycheck. He would tell us what we were going to do that day, and then he would go back in. He'd never watch us or anything. So, a lot of times we would do flag football or touch football. But it was full contact. I mean, except for the person that had the ball. So if you were on the line, you were hitting hard. And I mean, go home all bruised up. Beat the crap sometimes because you have no pads on. But the thing that I thought was really unique is when we would get back in the huddle, the jocks, who usually were the quarterback, well, they were always a quarterback and receivers. There's no doubt. The jocks played those two positions the most. And when we get back in the huddle, they would actually ask us, all of us, what we thought the next play ought to be. And that made it pretty interesting for me. And I'm pretty proud to say that one time they listened to me. And now here we are, we're playing flag football, and so it's almost always a pass play. Pass plays, or end arounds or something like that where you lateral and things like that. And I said, let's just run it up the middle. I said, our line is stronger than theirs. We can push them back, and they had this one guy who, if I ever had to play against him, the two of us were always into it. He was shorter than me, but he was a lot stronger. And so the only way I was going to ever stop him on the line was to get under him in the beginning. And that was really difficult. And that's when I'd go back all bruised up. So anyway, they said, but this is flag football. I said, yeah, but they won't be expecting it. So they said, well, who's going to run the ball? And I said, well, I'll run it. Now, I've never had, I couldn't even run fast anyway. But we did the play. They opened up the middle. I got 15 yards out of the first shot. And it was because it was a surprise. But even after that, every so often they'd say, let's run. And they'd give me the ball. I never got less than 7 yards. But it was really cool that these guys were more open. And I don't know why they were. But for some reason they didn't have this I'm better than you type of attitude. And it made it a lot of fun. There wasn't a lot of things in college I could say was fun. But that really was something I enjoyed. And we played basketball too, and they would share. In other words, they didn't hog the ball. So that was something that was going on that was good at college. Taught me something. Now at home, things not going so good. Like any teenager, especially back then anyway, tension between me and my parents was getting higher and higher. And my brother, he was going to University of Maryland. He was on his way out because all he did was party. And he wouldn't even go to his classes. And they even got him reinstated after they threw him out once, because he said he would he would buckle it down and work, and he didn't. He just got another semester free. So it was pretty crude of him to do so. But and yet my brother and I started getting along. I guess part of it was due to the fact that we were both against our parents. And really, when I say our parents, it really was my father. Unfortunately, my mother had to deal with this crap. You know, she had her weaknesses, her weak points, but she didn't deserve what she got out of it all. And I can say that I hadn't started smoking pot yet. Now, everybody else around me is smoking now. I mean, this is, you know, I was surprised that my brother had been smoking as long as he had. Was smoking while he was in high school. He's 2 years older than me. And here I am out of college, or out of high school, and into my second semester of college, and I still haven't started smoking. But one night, while we were sitting in my friend's basement, I finally said, "Pass that joint over here." And everybody looked at me. I said, "Look, I told you," I said, "when I was ready, I'd make the decision. You guys weren't going to force me into it. Now that you've let me alone, now I'm interested." So I took my first hit that night. Can't say I was excited about it, but I'm talking about the effect. The effect was kind of like, well, this is boring. However, within 7 weeks, I bought my first quarter pound. I'm officially dealing. Now, I had to, because I had no income except for painting cars now and then, you know, make a few bucks. So I bought a quarter pound. I split it up. I was able to sell, I guess, 3 of the ounces, made back my money, and now I had an ounce for myself. And that's how it worked for me. It's really lucky that I never got caught with what I was doing. But so now it's probably April or so. School's starting to wind down. College is starting to wind down. I'm getting in with this Booker and Sicky guy, and I'm sharing my pot, and probably somewhere along the way I took a hit off of killer weed, which was the pagan version of flakes or angel dust. Theirs supposedly was more potent, but I'm starting to think now it was pretty much the same thing, because I've now read a book on PCP, and it's basically 7 chemicals, and Sicky would tell me that theirs had 7 chemicals in it, you know, to get you off. Well, that's the 7 chemicals they used to make it. So theirs was probably similar. The only difference maybe was the fact that I was getting it fresher. And so by the time I got out of college for the first year, I was pretty much doing anything and everything. I can tell you too that during the summer, or maybe it was early in the fall, I quit smoking pot because I finally decided it was boring. So less than 7 months after I started smoking pot, I quit altogether. But that's when I committed myself to doing even worse. I only did PCP and well, now we call it crystal meth. It was crank back then. Fortunately, neither one was around all the time, so the ability for getting addicted to it was kind of slim. And I just said if I didn't have one of those two or acid, I would just drink my beer. I'd go back to being a redneck. So over the summer then, I started having problems again mentally. I just was really wondering why I even existed, and I was struggling really hard to make sense of it all. And I went to my parents and said to them that I thought I was going crazy. And they told me, well, you'll get over it. That's how they took care of the problem. And that's probably not unusual for back then. And hopefully parents aren't like that anymore. But if you have parents like that, then go get help somewhere else. Don't let yourself suffer with that. Because it's real. Depression is real, you know, and when your life is kind of going at 100 miles an hour anyway, and I mean, I didn't choose to go to college. I didn't say years ahead that I wanted to go to college. I didn't, you know, none of the way things were going was the way I wanted. I was hating my father, and I'm going to actually finish with this story because this just made me lose all respect for him. Now, I used to say my father was a hard worker. Never said much about how smart he was, but I said he was a hard worker. And I did kind of think he was smart, but he showed that he wasn't. And this is the story that kind of drove it home for me. My father was upset because my brother was smoking, not pot, cigarettes. He wanted him to stop smoking cigarettes. This is probably after he had been thrown out of college. I imagine that spring, my second semester of college was his last. And my father made a deal with him. Now, my brother had plans to start his own farming operation. He, in fact, he had bought my cattle, and our neighbor was going to move out, and we rented him that property. So we owned 125 acres, plus the 43 we were on, plus 48 somewhere that butted up to it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So my father made a deal with him. He says, you quit smoking for 6 months and I'll buy you a piece of farm equipment. And at the time, what he really needed was a manure spreader. And that was about $6,000, a used one. All right. So anyway, my brother says, okay. And he quits. He quits smoking. Now he's still drinking like a fish. He's smoking pot. He never, and of course my father didn't know he smoked pot, so that wasn't part of the deal, so he didn't know anything about that. And anyway, the 6 months went by. My father bought him the manure spreader. In fact, got it for him before the 6 months was up. And then my brother, 6 months to the day, went right back to smoking. Now that showed how stupid my father was, because my brother had demonstrated before that that's the kind of person he was. He was lazy. I think in some ways he still is, but at least he's serving a purpose now. He may not be physically working hard, but he's doing other things to try to better the world, if you will. But here he gets a $6,000 manure spreader just for not smoking for 6 months. Now that irritated me because I already knew that's what was going to happen, that he was going to go back to smoking. But now let's make it even worse. My father smoked cigarettes, and supposedly he had quit a couple years before. Come to find out, he never did quit. He was sneaking cigarettes all along. When he was up at work, he was smoking cigarettes. He'd come home and he would go out to the shed and smoke cigarettes. So he never quit. So he was the biggest hypocrite. And I couldn't believe that, and it made me lose all respect for him. So if you're a father out there, let that be a warning to you. It's the most ridiculous thing to sit there and expect something of your children that you don't do yourself. I don't know how anybody can ever think that way and think that it's right. Now, they may think that they can force their children to do what they themselves don't listen to, and they can for a while. But what good is it going to do in the end? It's just going to destroy everything. And some children will get past it, but like me, I've not gotten past it. I mean, I can, you might say, tolerate my father now, but that's about it. He doesn't have any fond memories of doing anything meaningful with me. It was all pain. And he just made it that much worse by doing things like he did there. So, I don't know what we'll cover the next, I guess, the beginning of my last year of college. So, and that's when things really go nuts. And till then, have a good day.